All right, so this is another meeting of our Curious About Unschooling and Self-Directed Education. Last week, we got to hear from Rocky explain a little bit about the story of his daughter who convinced him to allow her to leave high school and what the college transition was like for her. And we heard that from his perspective. So now we have Geeta here with us, and we're going to hear from her perspective. But I'm going to start by asking a question, and then if any of you have questions, you can share them in the chat, and we'll try and see if we could facilitate getting all of the questions answered. So I did come with 2 questions, but if only my first one gets answered because you guys have lots of questions, awesome. So my question starts with wanting to hear more from Geeta about her education experience up until that 10th grade, where she was kind of at a breaking point that said, I can't keep doing this. So wherever you want to start on that story as young would probably be of most interest, to be like, I knew back here because of this that I had that experience and then this didn't line up. So whatever way that you want to jump into the story, that's what I would love to hear most from you at this time.
Yeah, of course. That's a really great question. Thank you for that. Just for a little bit of background, I was at the same classical private school from kindergarten through 10th grade. So it was a K through 12 school. I was not actually in the public school system. I was at one of the better private schools in my area. And it was supposed to be one of those schools where like you learn a lot about like literature and rhetoric and history. And it was supposed to be like very, very liberal artsy. I would say the first turning point for me with my educational experience was probably in about 7th or 8th grade. So the school was split into 2 halves. Rather than having like elementary, middle, and high school, we had grammar school and upper school. Grammar school was kindergarten through 6th, and then upper school was 7th through 12th. So once I got through grammar school and I got to upper school, where like you got your own locker and like you moved a little bit more like around the school versus just being in the same classroom all day, that's when I started to realize that like I didn't really fit in with the other people that I guess I was surrounded by because I was interested in learning. And what I found was that many times my classmates weren't actually really interested in learning. They were checking off a box or getting a good grade on an assignment. And if they didn't get any feedback on their assignment, they were just fine with it. Whereas I was kind of frustrated that like I wasn't receiving feedback on assignments, even if I did well, because I wanted to know how to do better. And I guess from like that 7th through 8th grade through 10th grade, I always just assumed that I guess that was what school was supposed to be. And that I would just have to work within whatever system I had because there weren't really any better options in the area. Like my options were going to public school where I'd be in even more of like a rigid structure with teachers who probably also wouldn't give me as much feedback. Like I liked the personalized structure of the smaller school, but I didn't really realize that going off on my own was an option until 10th grade. And I guess once I realized that that was a path that was available to me, I spent like the last 6 months of my 10th grade year convincing my parents because it was a pretty, that they weren't very easily convinced by it. Like I was the one who had to fill out the paperwork, who had to figure out the rules and everything. So that was kind of the journey there. But it definitely took a few years for me to realize that it was a path that was available.
So what actually prompted you, like, how did that awareness come about, like, that you knew it was an option?
Honestly, I'm not sure if I can pinpoint a specific moment in 10th grade where I realized that like this is the option that I want. But one of the things that definitely sparked my interest and made me realize that it was possible, there are actually 2 things. Seth Godin's book, Stop Stealing Dreams, the free ebook that he has available. Yeah, that was definitely one of the first books that I read that was like that. So something that was nonfiction that my dad graciously forced me to read, not like actually forced, but I'm very grateful for that now. But like it was like you have to read this book, and I was like I don't want to read the book. But then after I did, I realized that there were other options out there for education, and then I actually started reading some unschooling blogs. I kind of happened into it. Um, I read Penelope Trunk's personality typing stuff, and in addition to writing about personality typing, because that was something I was interested in, she also wrote about the educational path that she was kind of going forward with her sons, and that's kind of what made me realize, like, hey, I could do this on my own. Like, I'm old enough to kind of build something a little more custom.
Gotcha. So I'd like you to share, did you say truck like TRUCK? Is that, because I would like to put that in the notes as to whose, do you know how to spell it?
It's Penelope. Yeah, it's trunk. It's like a tree trunk
Trunk.
at
Okay,
the end. Yeah.
trunk. Okay. And then, so now you have this uh, perspective that this is possible, and you go to your parents and they need convincing. And I guess what were the steps that you took based on either leading up to trying to convince them, or also after? What did you have to do to actually make this happen?
Also a great question. I think I started with actually convincing them that all of the current options were terrible. Like I started breaking down every single option. Like I started with, okay, the place where I am is not working for me. And I think my parents kind of agreed with me on that. So that wasn't too difficult to convince them of, because they saw that like I wasn't learning anything. Like I was super stressed about assignments that didn't even matter because they were piling us with a bunch of work because we'd gotten to like that age. So once they were like sufficiently convinced that the private school tuition that they were paying was not worth it, like that was another factor, telling them like you're actually paying money for this and you shouldn't be. Like these funds could be directed elsewhere. After I convinced them of that, we broke down all of the other schools. So like we looked at the other private schools in the area and we were like, okay, none of these are going to work. Like it's going to be the same issue, or like something. It's not the right fit. And then the public school, we actually tried to tour the public school. So my dad and I like conspired, we emailed the school and we were like, hey, like, is it possible to tour the public school? Because all the private schools would let you do that. And they wouldn't let us into the public school for like safety reasons. And so, like we tried to discover more about that, but like the public schools in my area are not that great. And like we hadn't heard good stories from anybody who had gone there. So that was ruled out as an option. And so once all of the options were kind of off the table, I was like, hey, so actually the homeschool rules are not really that difficult because they're not very strict in Pennsylvania. And I think that Pennsylvania is one of the stricter states, but it's still very easy to get all of the homeschool requirements. Like all you have to do is meet a certain amount of subjects and then have an official like evaluator. So someone who's a teacher or someone who's like certified as an educator sign off on your portfolio at the end of the year. And so it really was a very, very feasible process, considering that I had already completed many of the requirements. Like the only things that I really had left, I think, was like 2 more years of English and then maybe 1 year of math left to complete because I had already done everything else at the other school, with like electives and whatnot. So we realized that I could basically build curriculum around things that I was interested in, like personal finance. I could go with my dad to more conferences because I wouldn't be missing school. Like that would actually be my school. So I got to go to personal finance and business conferences and also learn online from like a really good writing teacher who gave me feedback on my work. And so we realized that if we kind of picked the best out of each of the subjects that I wanted to learn, whether that was a college class or an online class or like something entirely different, that it would be kind of the best option, and it would be cheaper actually than the private school was.
You're muted.
Carla, do you want to ask your question? Thank you, Rocky.
Yeah, my question was just like, how did you decide what you wanted to study or learn and still make it fit the wickets for the state law? Is that something that you kind of just did an overview of it over and then kind of finessed it, or did you pick books? Or it sounds like you just really kind of stepped out and went unschooling with the going to the conferences and things like that, but you still had certain wickets like government and different things that you still had to hit.
Yeah, that's definitely true that there was certain things. The requirements that I had to complete were actually pretty basic. just because like they didn't say that you had to do anything really super specific for English, just that you did English. So I was particularly interested in like persuasive writing and speaking. So that's like that rhetoric is kind of what I spent my time on. I also spent it on like blog writing or like practical writing. And like that could be my English class since I was designing the English class on my own.
So did you have to, when you say design, can you walk us a little bit more through like what you did have to document, I guess would be interesting. And I know this is Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah, this is for Pennsylvania, which I'm fairly certain is one of the more strict states, but I could be wrong on that. But documentation really, at the end of the year, I had to show that I had completed the sufficient amount of hours or days for the system. So I just had to like log all of my hours and how many hours I spent doing each subject. And I think the requirements for high school, it was like overarching for high school. It was like 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 3 years of science, um, and then like 2 years of art, history, social studies. Like it's generally less than what people actually complete in a normal high school, which is why it was pretty easy for me to fit in all of the other things that I wanted and like meet my hours requirements using like more like technically elective courses. Um, and for each of those like core subjects, I just had to document some of my samples. So for writing, what my evaluator liked seeing was, okay, this is the writing that you did at the beginning of the year. This is how you improve through the middle of the year. And then towards the end of the year, this is how you got even better than that. So she wanted to see progress in like 3 to 5 samples for each of my subjects and just hear me, because I had to meet with her like face to face and explain the kinds of things that I learned. And like what I felt I had gained from that, and like had I actually like learned something from this course. Like they just need to sign off and make sure that there's like actually coursework done, that there was improvement, and that something was like gained through that process. But that's kind of like the official process for them signing off on the homeschool paperwork.
Okay. Does anybody have any more questions about that part of it or this because I know we heard the launch to college, and I think that we were digging into that last time from Rocky. So I'm imagining people might want to hear from your perspective how that process felt, how you currently felt. I don't know if I want to say compared, but just in a college environment. I mean, it sounds like, or how what you did may have better prepared you for it.
Yeah, I can definitely speak more to that. I think I knew, actually, no, I did not know that I wanted to go to college. I knew that I probably wanted to go to college simply because I knew that if I didn't at least try, I feel like I would definitely be missing out on something. Like I just knew that that was my personality. But at the same time, I was not totally sold on the idea of college, particularly because it was so expensive. And as I'm sure my dad told you last time, my parents said I was going to be the one who was responsible for the whole bill. So it was not just like, oh, my parents are like, you know, paying to send me off for 4 years and I can just have fun, do whatever I want. Like it was very much like, okay, is this actually something that I want to spend money on? Am I going to find a school where I'm going to, just because I knew that like based on my previous academic experiences with like a small like private school and knowing that like the school system does have its flaws, I wanted to find a place where I felt that I could actually learn something in the academics, but also learn and grow like as a person, because I feel like that was a huge part of kind of the pull of college for me, was learning like how to grow up, how to live on my own. So I intentionally chose a school that I'm in New York City, for those of you that don't know, where they put us in apartments. And we don't have meal plans. We cook for ourselves. Like there's a business casual dress code, which is a little weird, but like it holds us to a higher standard. And they had a lot of like built-in community things. And again, it's a liberal arts school where a lot of the professors actually really do care about what they're teaching. They enjoy meeting with students for like office hours. They give feedback on things. So I am thankful that I did choose college, because I will be graduating. When I started college, I did not know whether or not I'd be staying through the whole 4 years or whether I'd like go off on my own to do something different. But I do feel like I was prepared for college, particularly for this whole Zoom college experience, because I had to spend 2 years on my own, kind of being self-motivated, which is not an experience that I feel like a lot of students get to have. And I think that it was valuable for me. even though like I wasn't as productive, I guess, as I had hoped to be in high school, just because it's really hard when you're like 16 or 17 or 18 years old and you're like doing your own thing and trying to like motivate yourself to follow something where there's not a lot of like built-in, I guess, like dedicated times. Like when you go to school, like a normal school, it's just like you are going to be here at this time and you just have to follow whatever schedule we give you. Whereas I was kind of like, okay, I have this, this, and this to get done this week. How am I going to schedule all of my days and all of my time? And it was definitely a little overwhelming. And I don't think that I, looking back, did as much with it as I could have. But at the same time, it's helping me a lot now to be more productive as I have to schedule my time. And I think that that's definitely one of the most valuable things that I learned from that experience, was like being a little bit more self-motivated than the average person my age.
So you're 2 years into college now, or you're at the halfway point? Okay. And I would say that makes a lot of sense. And it's one of the things that I say about self-directed education, is that you do have to make all of those decisions, and you realize how hard it is to do that. But the alternative of not allowing anyone in K through 12 to really have that level of control, and then expecting that college or life beyond high school is going to be easy, having not figured out yourself already in how to structure your time and how you learn, is also like not really, it does them a disservice basically, because they're just so directed. Any other questions that people have? I know Rachel is usually good with questions, so do you want to?
Well, I feel like, thank you, Geeta. This is wonderful to hear, especially for those of us who are bringing high schoolers up into this realm and kind of exploring. So it's wonderful to hear from people who've gone before and had success. So I appreciate, and I feel like you have, or am I using this? Okay.
I don't know if you are.
I'm not, I'm just talking. Sorry. Okay, so, and I think you answered the question a lot about how you kind of hit the requirements, because I do understand that the different states have their requirements, and that's just what you have to show in terms of graduation. I have kind of run across unschoolers who are just took all of that and threw it aside and said, we're not meeting any of the wickets. So that's interesting to me at some point to, talk to people who like radically departed. But I do think the lane that you guys went down it's going to speak to the broader spectrum of home learners, because they want to do it themselves, and yet there's this framework that you have to kind of stuff it into. And I think that's a powerful message to say, hey, there's a framework, but it's very loose. So go over here and do what you want, and then creatively figure out how to fit it into the slots. And it sounds like you had more oversight than the average bear, because in different states, you're not accountable to anybody to show them your work or prove your education. So it really just depends on, people need to research their own state laws. And if you take state funding, then there's a more level of accountability. And so you have to kind of figure that out, I guess. And so I don't know if this is a question you can answer, or maybe Sanat. I know we might hear from you at some point. Like, if you had to do it again, or if you know anybody who has, I don't want to say radically departed from the structure, because I don't know that that's where I sit exactly. But the idea that instead of, like you said, you were blogging and you were doing these other kind of alternative things, and then you were kind of fitting them into the requirements. But where I sit is how would you think creatively, and not to put you on the spot, for a student to take this alternative, incredible education that you've had, you've gone to these finance courses, and you've done all these really neat things. How would you possibly creatively present that to the world, or to a university, or to anyone, to say, hey, I've done these things. Yes, I had to fit everything into these wickets and come up with a transcript and submit it, because that's just kind of the game you have to play. But conversely, here's my portfolio of academics, or here's, what I'm saying about it, like, here's how I show what I've really done. And I'm wondering if that is a conversation in the unschool community that that is being had, or if people are producing things like that, and maybe this is just not even in your lane, but that was a long lead up to a question. But thank you for sharing.
Yeah, of course. No, that is a really great question. And that's something that I also thought about as I was applying to schools, because I literally made my transcript in Microsoft Word. And I was like, this is not gonna, like, I don't understand how this showcases anything that I've done. I'm literally 18 years old, like making my own transcript and just printing it out, like off of our printer at home. But I honestly, I was thinking the same way of how do I showcase this? And the biggest thing that I actually ran into was that colleges kind of don't care, which I know is a terrible thing to say, especially because I was at a college where it's a smaller school and they do try to get students, they do try to get to know students and their like journeys individually. But when colleges are doing their admissions processes and they're doing particularly their scholarship awarding, most schools base merit aid simply off of GPA and SAT scores. So as long as you have a good GPA, which I did because my parents and I were grading myself for my last 2 years. No, but I also had a good GPA from the first 2 years. So it wasn't like I went from like C's to A's, like I was straight A's all the way through. So it was like fine. But they genuinely are not really looking holistically at students most of the time when they are awarding stuff, because the way that the college system works doesn't really account for the fact that some students do have interesting academic journeys, which is kind of unfortunate, but that was what I experienced. Granted, for some, because I did not apply to Ivy League schools, I will say that I did not want to apply to Ivy League schools because I didn't think that that would be an experience that would fit for me, and I didn't want to keep trying on the SAT to get my score a little bit higher, because I was like right at the, like I needed to go a little bit higher if I wanted to be a strong candidate for Ivy League schools. So it might be different, like I know because they do ask for like very personal essays and they want you to talk about an experience, but from what I saw, most schools don't actually care about the different steps that you took and like what kind of a portfolio that you've put together. It was always people that were like outside of the academic space that were like, wow, that's really cool that you got to do that like when you were in high school. It was never anybody within kind of the college sphere.
And how many different colleges did you apply for that you're basing that off of? I just want to make sure to see, was it just the one, or did you have like, I was dealing with 10 or 5 or?
So I was only dealing with 2, just because since I was like making that decision of whether I even wanted to go to college, I wanted to get to know my 2 options really, really well. So I kind of had those picked out in like 10th grade. And then I spent the next 2 years like reading their handbooks, which I know is a little bit extra, but like I wanted to know, okay, what kinds of things do they need to set down as like rules for their students, and how are they treating students when they say, okay, these are the rules, like these are what you have to follow. And that's kind of how I realized which school was a better fit for me, was actually like going through all of that stuff that they give to you normally once you are a student, when you're a prospective student. But when I toured colleges, I did tour a few more colleges, even though I did not apply, that were a little bit like more different. They were some private schools, but also I think I did tour Princeton. I did tour one Ivy League school, but just the way that they spoke in their like presentations, and the way that all of the people who were like speaking to us and presenting to us and saying anything about like the academics or the application process, it was very much like not focused on an individual's experience. I don't like, they just genuinely didn't seem to care about any sort of like unique educational path in high school. Like as long as you checked their boxes, they were kind of fine with whatever you did. And if you wanted merit aid, if they even gave merit aid, because a lot of places don't anymore, if they even gave merit aid, it was going to be simply based off of like a statistical system that factored in GPA, SAT score, maybe something else, but that's kind of it.
Any other questions for Geeta?
Yeah, I have a couple. So I guess I'm actually a high school senior right now. So, well, a rising senior. So I'm going to be applying to colleges pretty soon. And I'd say I have the same sort of mentality that you had, in terms of not really being 100% sure that college is for me. So if I do go, I want to go to one that's really a great fit, and that will serve me well. So I guess just to dive more into that topic, what were some of the, like, how did you shortlist your college list to the two? Because right now I have a lot that I'm going through and like trying to figure out the details. And also in terms of I think I definitely agree with the point that, like, more than the fact that it might not be serve me well and like it might not fit with my thing, that's always, like, I could always go, and then if it doesn't fit, like maybe drop out or like transfer or something like that. But I don't, it's the part about wasting a lot of money, and then the enormous expense that would be, that scares me. So I guess, how did you like manage to pay your way through it? Was it mainly merit aid, or did you have to do other stuff as well? And yeah, I'd love just your take on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, of course. That's a really great question. It's so exciting to hear that like you're heading into all of this, but also I'm so sorry for you that it's happening during COVID, because honestly, one of the biggest things for me learning about schools was actually going and visiting, which I'm sure is probably a lot more difficult now because most colleges have probably closed off in-person tours. But you get a very, very different feel for a school on campus versus in person, versus online. So like if a school says online, like, oh, we care about our students, we have a very welcoming environment, and then you go to campus and like the people giving the presentations are like not welcoming, nothing that they say seems to demonstrate that they clearly care about their students, and like students are like not holding the door for other students, or everybody's walking around with headphones in. Like what I did was I looked for contradictions between, because everybody's obviously going to put their best foot forward in their marketing materials, which they should be, like that's something that they should do. But at the same time, sometimes the reality of a school and what you actually observe between students, or like if I stop to ask a student a question, or who was just walking past, like how did they answer? Were they welcoming? Were they friendly? Or were they like, I want nothing to do with you, like you're in high school? Because if they were going to treat me like that when I was in high school, that's the same way they were going to treat me when I was a freshman probably. And so like it wouldn't be easy to make like upperclassmen friendships. So I learned a lot by visiting the schools and also by talking to people who had gone there. If you ask them like what's something you wish you had known about the school before you got there, usually that'll get people going on something that they really, really dislike about the school. And that'll kind of, to contrast the best picture that you get from like the college's marketing materials, that will kind of give you, okay, this is the other side of it. And also like reading the handbooks really did help me choose, like reading the materials that they give to first year students. Like, don't just look at the stuff for prospective students, look at what they actually give you when you become a student, and or at least whatever you can find access to on the internet. One other thing is actually the common data set. So all colleges are required to publish kind of their information for admissions and for scholarships online. Bigger schools are usually better about having like every year, but even smaller schools will have like some years. So if you Google, for example, like Harvard University Common Data Set, you can click on a document that'll show you like what they prioritize in their admissions process and kind of like the breakdown of the school. And it gives you a lot of statistics. Sometimes like you can see, okay, if they're going to prioritize like sports as part of admissions versus like something else, like you can kind of see where the college's priorities lie in admissions, and that is all like public information that you can find for almost every school. So looking that up can definitely be interesting. But to speak to the financial side of college, my parents quickly realized, because I did apply for scholarships. There was a full tuition scholarship at the place where I ended up, and I was also a strong candidate for a scholarship at the other school. We didn't fully understand, like I said, the scholarship game, because we thought that there was a lot more to it than just GPA and SAT score and like the traditional like application. So I did not end up getting a lot of the bigger scholarships for my schools that I applied for. Like I got a merit scholarship based on I got the highest one based on my SAT and GPA, but like nothing more than that. So my parents and we reevaluated, because I was like, look, you guys, like it is not like something whenever you guys went to college where I'm not sure exactly what years, so I'm not going to say it, but like when college was so much cheaper, like you could like tuition was cheaper, like room and board was cheaper, like everything was so much cheaper than like even at a state school right now. Like you can end up paying $40,000 to $50,000 in state for a state school. So like I was like, look, I can pay that same amount and go to a private school, actually less than that, but like I'm still going to need help getting to this. So we kind of reached a happy medium where I work a part-time job and that pays for all of my living expenses, basically anything that I want to do beyond just like tuition and housing. And that also pays for my groceries since I'm not on a meal plan. So I did save some money there by not being forced into like one of those freshman year meal plans, just because I don't eat a lot of food, so I can just buy very little at the grocery store. And my parents are loaning me money. So like we keep track of stuff, or I'm working on a little bit of stuff for my dad with his website and with his brand. And so like I'll work for them and they'll pay me like more than like entry level work. So that kind of, it's like basically I'm still working for what I have to pay for school. So they're not just like giving me money. Like I have to ask them for it every month. Like it's coming out of my account. So like I even just hate asking them for it just because that's not something I enjoy doing. So they did put little things in place so that it's not just like we're paying for this and everything's taken care of. Like you have to be on top of this. You have to make sure you pay your bills on time. Like we're keeping track of the money that we're loaning you and you'll have to pay it back at some point, kind of a thing.
Got it. Yeah, that was really useful. I guess another follow-up to that is, obviously you vetted the college really well and then found that it was a good fit, but was there anything that you did differently to sort of supplement your formal education with continuing to do stuff that you did early, like previously with unschooling your stuff? Like how did you, because I'm assuming even if it was different from other college experiences, it was still had that structure and that formal education type thing. So how did you like sort of adapt to it and still keep your like freedom or be able to explore things in that environment?
That's a really great question. And to be honest, my first year was definitely a pretty big struggle for me in that regard, just because I was taking a lot of the like freshman classes and like I wasn't taking classes for my major yet, even though I had transferred in like a semester's worth of credits, basically because I did all of my math college math so that I wouldn't have to take college math. So I did it in high school so that I could double up. But because I was only transferring in math, like I was still in like the freshman English courses and other stuff because they wouldn't take like my AP credit for that. So I did struggle through the kind of like basic gen ed stuff that everybody has to take because it didn't feel meaningful to me. And since like college work takes up a lot more time than I was expecting it to, just because I was a little bit more flexible in my last 2 years, like that was something that I wasn't necessarily expecting. And that was a little bit of a rougher transition for me in my first semester, just going from like doing kind of being able to schedule my whole week and not having like that much work to do, going to like the college level of, okay, I'm taking like a full college course load and it's stuff that I don't necessarily want to do. That was an adjustment. What kind of helped me was doing stuff on the side that I did enjoy. So like I still did go back to the finance conference. Like I missed a day or two of school and it was worth it. So I got to go again the following year. And I tried to keep up with like reading things that I was interested in. Even if I didn't necessarily have time to read a book, there are still some really great bloggers out there who like summarize an idea from a book or who have like an email newsletter that goes out once every week. Like Seth Godin writes his every day. So I tried to keep up with that because it was small little chunks that I could read and I could still find like a useful piece of like information and kind of grow from that. And also just trying to talk to friends about those kinds of things because I did choose a place where people are interested in learning. So we would talk about things that even if we weren't talking about them in our classes, whether it was like psychology or like something along those lines where we weren't taking a class for it. And I also joined the debate club. So that was really helpful for me because it felt like, okay, I can actually learn about history, about politics, and all of these things are going towards something, and I'm learning how to become a better persuasive speaker. Like I'm getting to consistently stand up in front of people and have to think of arguments on my feet. So I think that within any kind of college, like if you choose something that's even like close to the right fit for you, you can basically figure out like, okay, is there a club that I can join that's going to help me grow kind of outside my academic subjects? And is there like little things that I can do every day that'll kind of keep that like momentum of like self-directed learning going?
So is that sufficient for you, Sanat, at this moment? Because I know Rachel mentioned hearing from you. So I think it would be nice to hear a little bit of your perspective. So I met Sana at commencement of Pod 5. So we spent the whole time up until day 35 not knowing or running into each other. And then he spoke up at commencement and I direct messaged him like, we need to talk. And it's been since then a lot of collaboration between us. And I'm just very impressed by him and what he is doing what he's been doing leading up to his senior year. And, you know, he definitely has some big decisions ahead of him to really grow into the change maker that he already is. So I just like to hear a little bit from him and all of you to hear a little bit from him too.
Can I throw in something quickly?
Yes.
Just on the choosing colleges, this just occurred to me while Geeta was speaking. I think that looking at communication to alumni is also a good sign, just to see how that community is held. I think it can say a lot.
Yeah.
Are you saying like how the school actually handles their alumni versus talking to alumni, or both?
Well, it could be both, but I mean, what's the relationship between the school and alumni? I personally went to a school that has a strong focus on alumni. So if I look at, you know, the magazine that I receive every month from them versus the magazine that I received from a different university that I went to as well, which is a much larger university, they both, to me, give a very good feel of what those schools were like and actually what my experience was like.
Mm-hmm.
Just an idea.
Yeah. I mean, and I can speak from, mine was my graduate program, and I chose my graduate program. I don't know if that's something you would all be interested in, Geeta, or, I mean, Sanat's further down, but when I chose it, it was because I could see that the professors were collaborating with former students. They were writing books together. They were publishing journal articles together. They were creating products together. And it was like so obvious to me that the relationship between the professors and the students in that place has got to be dramatically different than what I had experienced prior. So it does mimic more of the way things are in the Akimbo community, inside the community I happen to choose for a program for my master's. So thanks for bringing that up, Kara. That's a really good point.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think I have been talking to some alumni from a couple of schools that I'm interested in. So yeah, that's been really useful to get a more of a feel for how the school has impacted them after they graduate. Yeah, but in terms of, I guess I'll just like give a brief intro about myself for people who don't know. So yeah, thank you, Nicole, for like the kind words. It's been really, really amazing collaborating with Nicole, and she inspires me so much to do everything I'm doing. So yeah, it's been amazing. So I'm actually not unschooled or homeschooled. I'm part of a public school over here, but I actually wish, like I kind of regret not doing what Geeta did and trying to take an alternative route, because I definitely think that could have helped me a lot more and given me more time to explore things that I've now had more time because of unfortunately everything that's going on. Our school went online, and then it was sort of like being unschooled, because that really didn't take up a lot of time, and then I had time to actually start a podcast and do all of the stuff that I'm doing right now. But yeah, so in terms of my background, yeah, I'm from a public school, but I've still tried to basically explore and do kind of unschooling type things outside of my school as much as I can. So I was involved a lot with journalism. That was actually something that really helped, that I'd say was a big benefit of the newspaper that I was able to join and be a part of. And that taught me a lot of actual skills. That was actually more of an unschooling type environment because it was completely student run. We had like an advisor who just looked over our articles or gave some advice from time to time, but in general, the ESEs or the editors basically were students and they graded us. They did all of the um, managing and everything, but we had a lot of freedom to actually write about whatever we were passionate about. And I was able to actually start a podcast for the newspaper and just like take initiative and then do that. And so that was really a fun experience. And then apart from that, I was really involved with environmental activism in my area. So I was leading basically a youth-led nonprofit here, and we were involved with basically working with the city on a lot of local policy, and recently passed a strong REACH code, which is basically requiring sort of a natural gas ban and requiring electric infrastructure in buildings and things like that. So basically doing a lot of like policy work. And I've kind of just jumped between different interests like journalism, activism, and now more podcasting and entrepreneurship is what I'm like diving into and exploring through the podcast, through things like, I guess now I'll get into Studify, which is sort of the idea that I'm exploring, kind of connecting podcasting as well as journalism, media, and entrepreneurship. So that was born out of recently an entrepreneurship boot camp sort of experience that I had, a virtual boot camp, which I'd really recommend for anyone who's like interested. It's by Draper University. I guess I'll put the link in the chat later, but that's a lot of like they really give you a lot of time to explore and come up with your idea, but they also have like lectures and sort of presentations on different topics. So that was really helpful. But at the end, I came up with an idea for basically a podcasting network for young people, to a network and a community for young people to be able to basically, I think mostly I'll focus on interview-based podcasts where they get to like talk to experts in whatever fields they're interested in, and start a podcast and share that knowledge and information with others, and mostly other young people. So that's kind of the idea that Nicole and I have been exploring together, sort of. So I think that would be a great educational tool. Like it's really helped me get into entrepreneurship through the podcast. My podcast is basically interviewing young entrepreneurs so far, and young generally change makers, but so far it's been mostly entrepreneurs who are using it as a tool to basically make change in their community and society. And so that's been so much more useful than anything I've learned from, like, honestly, anything I've learned in school, and even from entrepreneurship, like, I guess, like structured entrepreneurship classes, or maybe like business classes I've taken at community college and things like that, because it's really helped me get like more practical and tactical advice from them. So yeah, that's I think it would be amazing for other youth to have access to that, and be able to not worry about have all the resources with other podcasters, a community of other podcasters, as well as maybe mentors who are professional podcasters and have done it for a while, and also be able to share their expertise, as well as like help with production and audio editing and all of that, and basically collaborating on things like that. So yeah, just really creating that community to make it easier and more accessible for young people to do that. And then eventually using that community to create a media company based on youth podcasting, and targeting a youth audience as well. So that's sort of the idea behind that.
So if anybody has any comments or questions for him, I'm sure it might help him move forward. But we have been talking about this for a little while in different formats. So he's kind of getting clearer on what he wants to do, what he will do.
Yeah.
So one thing I'd like to point out is just the fact of like what I heard you say and what I know is that you learn better by doing things. And so that's what I think I heard from Geeta's last 2 years. It was a lot of doing things of interest and learning as she just followed that interest. And that kind of learning sticks longer than sometimes sitting through an English class where you're being told everything you have to do just to kind of please the requirements of that class when you're leading to do your own requirements. And in terms of the funny part about what Sana is doing with his podcast is that my concept when I was during pod 5 was that like I interviewed him and was saying, when did you first start thinking about being an entrepreneur? And like, what do you who do you listen to? What do you need to learn from? And so the concept is to have young people learn how to become the people they really want to be by talking to other people who have done it before, like this, and just putting that out into the world so that other young people could actually, that might be the spark where I ask you to like, what was it that made you realize that you could do this? And I think there's a lot of young people who don't know that even if they do have to stay inside of high school, or they choose to stay inside, like Sanat, right? That they can still do a whole bunch of things outside of it to develop themselves. Even if college doesn't care about it, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. So, any other questions? I see hands raised, so just take yourself. I'll go Kara first and then Rachel.
Okay, sure, I'll go. I'm curious to know what you love about podcasting. Why podcasting?
Yeah. I actually like was hooked onto podcasting, like, or listening to podcasts at least from middle school, I guess, like 8th grade. I just listened to the first one and I just loved the sort of, I mean, initially it was like I just listened to it while running or doing other things, and then I just kind of really love the experience of being able to, especially interview-based podcasts. Those are the ones I really, I think almost all of the ones I listen to are sort of conversations between people and like interviews. And so just there's just something about like a conversation, like hearing someone's story. I just think everyone has like a really interesting story to tell, and just a long form discussion where you really dive into it, and then that sort of makes the person more open, and instead of just getting like a 10-second or a 1-minute version of them where they just give their accomplishments or they just give their I guess exterior self, you actually get to hear more about them as a human and like their like them being vulnerable, their failures, and just really get to feel like you know them after that. So I think that really appeals to me, because I think a lot of the other content that's maybe like even interviews or things like on talk shows or whatever, they're really surface level, and so I like going deep and like hearing more about a person's story. Like, for example, someone I actually recently interviewed, and I think the latest podcast, we were initially just talking about like he actually built a publication to an economics and history blog. So initially we were just talking about that and like how he built his team and everything about that. But then we got deeper into it, and he started talking about how he had like a lot of what he does, like he started doing model UN and things like that because as a kid he had like a very bad stutter, and he was really he really couldn't speak at all with people, and he was really shy and all of that, and he really struggled through that, and that's what sort of overcoming that was why he started doing things like public speaking, model UN, and eventually getting into history, economics, and then now being like leading a team of like 40 people. So it was really interesting to hear that.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that I asked the question. That's really helpful to me as I reflect on my own interest in podcasting. I am not in love with podcasts. I have never found a podcast that I love. Like they take up space in my ears and my brain, and yet I feel like hearing you is affirming what I sort of feel like. I think there's a space. I listen to people professionally, or that's one of the things I do. I listen to people's stories. I'm a therapist, and often when I'm hearing interviews, not necessarily on podcasts, but any sort of interview, but long, what are supposed to be comprehensive interviews, I find myself going, I would have asked this, or I would have asked this, like, as you say, just going a little bit deeper. So, and I also, it's my experience, I'm also a teacher. I'm an elementary occasional teacher. So I spend a lot of time in schools, and I really feel there's a deficit in that environment, in the oral environment. It's a classroom of kids who are the same age listening to one teacher, and there's very little modeling of adult conversation or adults exploring things. And again, as you were speaking, I was thinking, maybe that's even true beyond schools. Maybe that's true in the broader culture. We don't have a lot of opportunities to hear really important and deep conversations. And I mean deep, emotionally, spiritually, but also deep in terms of the content. So it could be anything. Yeah, so that's super helpful for me. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Rachel, can I unmute you? Because I know it looked like you had a question. I don't know why it's not letting. There we go.
There you go. Kara, can I just say I love everything that you just said. Everything you just said was just gold, because just hearing that one voice and not having that communication, and I totally agree with you, it's a cultural thing, and I think Sanat has stumbled into that. Like, where are these voices of the youth? They're valuable. They're the ones that are going out into the world. They're trying to discover what the world is made of right now, and where do they fit, because it's moving so fast and changing so quickly. And even the adult community doesn't really know what's going on. So we can't top down tell everybody this is how it's going to be. We have no idea. It's all being redefined. And so I love that. Thank you. And I appreciate the question, and I appreciate you answering it, Sanat. Why podcasting? Because I agree that I'm not an avid podcast listener. My husband is. Oh my goodness. So he's always playing me, and I feel like it's space in my ears, and I have so much going on up here that to listen is just more noise, but there's so much value in listening, like you said, Sanat, to these conversations and pulling out. And so my goal with podcasting is to be more intentional about listening, so that we can ask the questions and really hear. I tend to be a person who does the talking, and I want to be a better listener. I think podcasting helps develop that. So that was just a fabulous conversation. Thank you, guys. What I wanted to ask you, Sanat, was going back to this idea of the community that you want to develop. I have 2 high schoolers that are running through here right now, but and I'd love to put them on a call with you at some point. So what are you looking at, and you're already working on, I know, in terms of community and conversation, other than sitting down to a podcast interview, which I know you're kind of exploring. There's my, hi Brandon. I'm running through here. But exploring people who've kind of gone before, entrepreneurship, or, kids that are doing these projects or whatever, and they're pointing back to you and giving lots of cool advice to your community. Do you also envision, or what are you trying to stand up for the youth that are in this age bracket that you're in, that my kids are in, to say, we're not exactly arrived yet. We do want to learn, but together, how do we sort of pull on each other's strengths and collaborate and create something. Is that kind of what you're envisioning? And if so, what
Mhm.
type of community are you looking at?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think definitely it's not at all just for experienced podcasters or people who've already built one. I think it's definitely for I mean, it's more for people who want to get into it or are just starting out to be able to utilize the community and people who've done it to be able to yeah, get their insight and start it. I think so in terms of the platform, discourse, sort of how forward link and all of that runs, I think that'll be sort of the beginnings of it. So we'll probably have some sort of structure and curriculum like pod. So I think if an easy way to think about it is sort of like the podcasting fellowship, but sort of for youth. But I mean, of course, there's going to be more elements and sort of different elements to it, but it would just be the fact that the main parts of it would be that you would have like a sort of a curriculum or some like content that you can go through and just learn the basics, but then more of it would involve like the community. So we would probably have Zoom calls or calls at least once a month or bi-weekly maybe, and just like discuss how things are going, how like we do have in forward link. And yeah, just basically taking all of that and giving it to youth and having a youth-based community, I think is sort of the general idea. Yeah, I don't think it would be that much different from that. Yeah.
Yeah, so if I could, we are at time, so I don't want to hold anybody who doesn't want to stay, but just so you know, what we've agreed to is kind of hold this space for an hour to talk about this concept, just bring our curiosity, have a conversation around this. But at 1 o'clock, we are segueing to, we are in the process of building a community for people who want to create their own school. So that is something that me and Sana have talked about. He is supporting me in that endeavor, and I am supporting him to create a similar community, but for youth podcasters. And knowing that we have access to like a forward link community that can, people who might want to mentor younger podcasters, who might want to pair up with a younger podcaster to become their editor or their audio editor. And you will learn just by editing someone else's podcast because you have to listen to their conversations. So there's a lot that will go into that, but in 15 minutes, our friend Craig Constantine from one of the All-Stars is joining in to kind of have another conversation with us about how to build online communities. So we switch now into this conversation about how do we actually execute these visions. And so I don't know whoever wants to stay around. I know that Rachel's agreed, Sonat's agreed. If anybody has curiosity about building online communities using discourse, they are welcome to stay. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye on this recording, and we'll see you next time.